this is old school workflow right here for games. And when I say old school, I mean it's still happening, but there are some other things that we can do now. So there's our audio dog on the left. He's creating awesome sounds, right? And what he would do when you're working on games where you don't have middleware, right? You don't know, maybe the engine is not as sophisticated. He actually speaks to the programmer who's there in the middle. And they get together and they have a great conversation, and they actually have to know each other, right? They actually have to interact. Well, they don't have to necessarily like each other, but they have to work together, right? The programmer has information that the composer and the sound designer needs, and he's basically going to have to put that whole thing together. So at the end of the day, you create a bunch of sounds. Our audio dog creates a bunch of sounds, and he puts together what's called an asset list with it. So he's got a folder with a bunch of sounds in it, and he's got an asset list. Now, that asset list is crucial, and you'll see this in all companies. Sometimes they have none. Sometimes you'll record 1,000 lines of dialogue, and you'll be like, what do you want me to call them when I edit them? And they're like, don't know. And at that point, you say to yourself, well, okay. And then you edit them, and you go VO01, VO02, VO03, VO04. And then you give those 1,000 lines of dialogue to, you're sending them to some poor integrator or programmer who's going to be like, I have to listen to each one of these now to know what they are. And I've done this. I've been there. I mean, it happens all the time. So asset lists are your best friend in terms of creating lists of media to tell a programmer, tell an integrator what they need to do with your material. It seems basic, but it's often the missed step between the producer and the programmer, right? So you can often be like an audio superhero out of the box. If you say to your producer, you say, hey, let me help you generate a file naming convention for these files. And we'll put together an asset list in the or have them talk to the programmer, and then you may get file naming conventions from them. So an asset list is just a simple list of what the media is. It's an Excel spreadsheet, right? Where it goes in the game, what the name of it is, what the handle is, and then what the actual file name is, so that everybody's literally on the same page. Okay, so in this scenario, you've made your sounds, you've got a wonderful asset list that you've created, and you give it to your programmer, and then he may or may not be musical, right? Now, if you're lucky, you get an audio programmer, right? Somebody who specifically knows music and knows code, right? And that's a wonderful thing, because they can help you build tools as well. But in this scenario, you give it to your programmer, and he goes back away and puts it into the game. Looks at your list, puts each sound in, attaches them the attributes that need to happen, and then that's the engine over here, our game engine over on the right. Maybe it's an engine like Unity 3D, which we're looking at today, the Unreal Engine, right? The Unreal Development Kit, used in a lot of AAA titles. I've just listed a bunch of them here so you'd get some names: Cocos 2D, Scream, Quake, the Blender, Flash, Game Engine. Some of you may have heard of. So he puts them in, and then he plays you the stuff, and you're like, ooh, it's all in the wrong place. Or it's all in the right place. It's hit and miss. If you've worked in TV or linear media, you've done the same thing. You've delivered a bunch of tracks, and then you go to watch your show, and all your friends are around eating popcorn, and then you can't hear any of your music in the show because the TV integrator, right, or the mixer buried it. So that's a very one-on-one personal connection that you're going to have, hopefully, with this programmer, and afterwards, that's why I showed the picture, you're going to go out and eat pizza together, right? So that's great. You'll get some lunch.